Joker here, and here's some of my truths that I use to get good at gaming. Tempo. Tempo is effectively, are you the aggressor, the defender, or are we in a neutral state? What does this all mean? When you're the aggressive, that means that you're taking the offense. While you're on offense, you get to dictate the flow of the game. You get to make decisions, and your opponent then has to be the one to respond to whatever decisions you make. When it comes to defense, it's also important to know what your opponents and your outs are. I'm going to go back to Magic. Let's say your opponent's at 3 mana, and your board is pretty big, and your opponent hasn't played a lot of cards on the board. It is very likely that your opponent has maybe a board wipe to reset the board state, having card advantage. So, what that potentially means is maybe you may want to play a little bit slower in order to prevent your opponent from just taking out all your important pieces. The other mistake I see a lot of players make is when they're playing on offense and they overstep. They're throwing this right hook and their opponent is waiting for that right hook. They duck it and turn the tides around. You overplayed your hand. Playing on defense usually means that you're behind. That means your opponent has taken the tempo and is trying to dictate the flow of the match. As defense, you have to look for an opportunity to turn the tides on your opponent. Now let's take a look at a different game, but in a defensive manner. Let's say your opponent is trying to force some of your pieces so that way they can take a free piece. How do we defend against this? Let's take a look at the square the knight is trying to take. If that square is defensible, maybe you want to put a piece to defend that square to prevent that knight from coming in. Or maybe you can find a bigger threat on your own. Maybe you can attack their queen, or maybe you can find a check or a checkmate. One of the biggest mistakes I find, while you're defending, you try to play the aggressor and don't understand that you don't have the tempo of the game, and that usually leads to mistakes. If your opponent is good, chances are you've fallen into their trap. The neutral state is when both players are on equal footing. Nobody has quite been able to take the tempo of the game and able to become the aggressor. That means that neither player has set the flow, but are trying to find a way to themselves into a better position.